this is the Meshery development meeting. Today is 5th May, and we are almost ready to get started. Okay, let me just. And if you haven't already put down your names on the meeting minutes and add any agendas that you might have to the topics. So let's not waste any time and get started with Aditi on operator lifecycle. Aditi, you want to take from here?
Hey guys, thanks Navendu. So I'll be talk about primarily be talking about my recent work on versioned operator downloads and versioning the operators throughout their life cycle. I'll be sharing a spec. I'll be sharing my screen to
Yeah, you can share your screen.
Navendu, can you scroll down to the
So
implement? Okay, I'll share.
Okay.
Yeah. So is my screen visible?
Yeah, it's visible.
Right. So the issue I'm trying to fix is the earlier efforts to in the direction of the operator lifecycle just involved using the fixed hard-coded URLs from the master branch, and since like the other Meshery manifests, these need to be versioned, and Meshery operator and the other manifests are in a separate repository with different versions. We have to have a separate versioning for them in the config.yaml. So my approach is this, and I wanted to seek the community's feedback. So first version, there'll be one version key with two versions, Meshery and Meshery operator. So the first thing I did was change the config file to accept two versions, and this is my commit for the same. So as you can see from a string and string, it's now a map and string. And I have just changed certain functions to, uh, uh, to take it as Meshery instead of just plain version. The second thing I did was extracting this and using it to create get operator URLs. Now, as I said, we need to download these based on operator version, and this removed the hard-coded URLs, and this was like the most key commit of the ones I've made till now. Yes, see, fetching manifests takes operator version, and and this was initially a hard-coded URL changed, and this retrieves URLs based on version. Now, since Navendu had brought up a good point that for now Meshery has its own channel key also, and the operator will need one as well. For now, that will be phase 2, where similar to operator, I'll have a channel for Meshery and Meshery operator separately. So for now, I have added a function get operator release tag in which I'm assuming the channel to be stable, and once I have added version considerations for during the operator lifecycle, I'll add channel. So this is
Hey, Didi. Hey.
Yes,
Didi,
I'm sorry.
Apologies on the interruption. The question, the reason I interrupt is because...
I'm sorry, I can't.
Oh, okay. Yeah, can everyone else hear me, or is my microphone messed up?
Yeah, we can hear you.
I'm sorry.
I can hear you just.
Okay. Aditi, you're occasionally going in and out, which might make it such that I'm going in and out a little bit. Are you able to hear me mostly? A little.
Yes, I can hear you, Lee.
Okay, cool. So Aditi, I'm not sure if you'll be able to hear all of what I'm about to say. I hope so. The reason that I interrupted, and I'm sorry for doing so, is because you have the best of intentions and a good idea, but seeing that you're implementing according to the design, we need to review the design, or and that's not because you shouldn't go off and do excellent things, but that's just because I don't know that we'll have a separate release channel for the operator. The operator, it should follow along. It's a component of Meshery server, like the adapters. It should be treated in the exact same fashion as the adapters. The adapters follow a stable and edge release channel, just like Meshery server does. You should be able to pin to a specific version of Meshery operator if you so choose. If there was a use case for, or rather, if your deployment calls for that for some reason, that would probably normally be because there's a bug in like the latest stable edition or something like that, or because you weren't comfortable moving forward with the latest release. You as a user wanted to pin to an older version. But the concept of having another release channel is, if I was interpreting this correctly, that we should chat through that more. Or
Okay.
we're, actually, maybe I'm, and this is just me, so Abhishek and Navend, everyone else on the call, please chime in. Aditi, maybe I'm putting more words in your mouth than what you were saying. It might be that what you were saying is, you might have been saying the same things like, hey, the operator is a component. It should be versioned.
Okay.
We should do some diligence to version it. We should enable the user to pin to a certain version if they want to.
Yes.
The operator should also, so just like the adapters and just like Meshery server, as we go to version the operator, it should have a stable release and a edge release. And maybe I was misinterpreting what you were saying, because though that stable release and that edge release, that's one in the same as Meshery server's stable release and edge release. Like, while that's a confusing statement, what I just said, because technically the operator, just like the adapters, can be released at any given time whenever they're ready, because they are their own component. They
Yes.
just need
Exactly.
they just need to guarantee some level of compatibility with the other latest editions of the other components, and so I guess as a manner of phrasing, like, it's not inaccurate to phrase it just like you are, which is each of those components have their own stable release channel and edge release channel. That's one way of phrasing it. Like, I think that's probably accurate. I think it's probably also accurate to say the project, hey, as a user, are you running Meshery? Yes, you are. Oh, okay. Is your Meshery are you subscribed to the edge channel or to the stable channel? And when someone asks that, and when someone characterizes that, there would only be one response. It wouldn't be like, well, this adapter, it's on the stable channel and the server is on this. It's like, no, hey, for a given deployment, there's only two choices. And that's why I interrupted. I wasn't sure if.
Okay. Okay. So instead of having a separate operator channel, I'll use the Meshery channel for the same intents and purposes. That's it, right? That's what.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. I wish I had biceps, because then I like do the like a real emoji, like that, I have to go work on my biceps just for that. Yeah, perfect, cool. I think that's probably it's just a slight tweak. It's like 85% in alignment already, and just the
All right.
I do have one another concern.
Yeah.
Basically, I had two, but Lee had covered one. So I have one more concern where so how are we going to limit certain versions to certain versions of operator to certain versions of Meshery? For example, let's say
I
we have sorry.
Well, Abhishek, your voice is cracking a bit.
Uh, is it tracking for everyone? Okay. Okay.
well, no, actually, it is cracking a little bit for me as well.
Oh, 1 second. Is it fine now?
Yeah, it's yeah.
Okay, cool. So what I was saying is that let's say, for example, Meshery 5.2 is supports Meshery operators version 1, and 5.3 supports Meshery operators version 2. And basically, if someone goes and modifies the config.yaml so that they wanted to run 5.2 with Meshery operators version 2, then it shouldn't get supported. So is that like we will need a validation layer over this, right?
Yes. I honestly hadn't thought of this till now. Thank you. I'll once I'm done with version, I'll try to add the validation layer, but I'm not sure how I'll know like how like which version corresponds to which. I'm not sure of that yet.
And that's okay. I don't think that like as a project we'll have to first establish a framework wherein we're basically we have a compatibility matrix. There's an open issue to create one, and as a project maturity level, we're not to a point wherein we're defining that, you know, and keeping that in hard terms, and B, I don't know that we ever necessarily will. I'm not sure. I think what we would do is we would make specific rules, conventions about how releases are done and how versions are tracked, and it would be um, something like this. So most of you are all familiar with the notion that we're using semantic versioning, and there's a little bit of semantics to this style, this convention of versioning, but it goes something like you can use different labels and things, but it's basically x.x.x. Maybe you've got other things that you put behind it and things, but basically it goes, you know, major, minor, patch is kind of the you've all this is just it's just a convention, and it's like, hey, the more software that follows similar conventions, sort of the easier it is to, you know, use the same language to communicate. And so part of our build and release strategy, which there's a really well-written doc on Meshery's build and release strategy, you'll find it in the community drive, but is and this is a prelude to a future conversation that perhaps when there is a lot of rigor around what component is compatible with what component and what API guarantees are there between that what we might end up doing, I'll foreshadow that what might happen is we might say within the major version numbers that there's no compatibility guarantee across all the components. Like this would be something that we would work towards, but within the minor and patch, that if your server version, it's to give an example, if you're running a component that's 1.1.5 on that for the server, and then the operator is 1.1.5, one, that what we might get to is like, oh, that's fine. Like, so long as your, compatibility is guaranteed from here on down, that type of a thing. We're not there yet. And anyway, so the point is, I think that that's a bad ask right now to try to, like, the framework and the CI systems and stuff, that's not, we're not to a point by which there is a list to refer to and then to keep track of. But does that make sense? Or does anybody want to recharacterize what I said? Basically correct me.
I think it sounds like it. Yeah, it makes sense.
But is not a concrete thing. Rather, I think the only concrete statement is today there isn't a list to go to say this works with this, and so today it mostly what we're shooting for with users and with all of ourselves is that if you're subscribed to a given channel, of which there are two, and refresh my memory. Do we separate out channel inversion like this?
Yeah, we have to channel inversions.
Okay. Basically, that if you're running a configuration of the, and by the way, we're really talking about mesh config, the config.yaml, which is where you control the configuration of your Meshery deployments. That, if you, like, these are going to be the two most common configurations. You might have a Meshery deployment that's running latest stable or latest edge. So you're living vicariously here, or not vicariously, you're living dangerously here. Sorry. And, you're being, safe here. And that, yeah, there may be, okay. And so there's the server, there's individual components released individually, and some of them are released together today. So the UI is released together with the server. It's possible you can split them out, but they're just released together today. Meshery CTL released separately, adapters separately, operators separately. You can, if you are an advanced user and you have a particular use case to do so, that within the config, you'll also see things like what adapters you're running. And by default, you'll just see them listed, as such. If for some reason you needed to run a particular version of that component, you would go ahead and, as a user, place a tag behind it. And then that's how you would pin. You're pinning to, actually, it wouldn't be just like that. It would be, you would pin to that version. So the same needs to, or I would suggest, Aditi, if you will consider this, please, I would suggest that we're looking at, basically, we want to treat the operator just like any other component, and the most relevant component that looks like an operator is an adapter. And so the way that, so right here, if this is someone's config, it's like, well, what manifest you grab? Well, you grab, sorry, I keep hitting the wrong key. You grab stable latest because that's what they have configured. Unless they decided to, update this to be, so I'm going to go look at the operator, by the way. So I think somewhere in this design spec, it says that we're not versioning the operator. But if that's true, that would be horrific. That would not be good.
Currently, we aren't. Yeah.
Okay.
We aren't in the config.yaml, I meant, not in, obviously we are doing it in the repo. Sorry, I'll change that.
No, yeah, or perfect.
So I had another point to make. Is it fine if I can go ahead?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I don't know if it applies to this exactly, but if you, let's say, have the logic that is checking against the compatible versions. So if you say something like Meshery v0.2, I know no one uses it now, perhaps, but just in general, with in regards with version checks, in case there's a bug found in future that makes it incompatible with another piece or another service. So how exactly do you handle that? So let's say there's a list of known bugs and you hard code the fact that you cannot use one with another. But in case in future someone discovers, okay, this feature is glitchy when you combine these two. So how exactly is that handled? I don't know if I made it sense.
Yeah. Do you mean how is the use? So does anyone else want to answer that? In part, that's what Aditi is. That's one of the use cases that Aditi is addressing for the operator, and it's to say something like, "Well, what's the latest release of the operator? It is V212. Oh, turns out there's a defect that's not compatible with kind or something. And so in my environment, I need to bring it back a release. And so what Aditi is making true here is that if a user wants to pin to a specific version, that they would apply.
No. I meant, is there any automated checks that
Nope.
is in
Yes,
place?
yes, and no. Yeah, and that was the first part of what I was saying is that there is, when the project reaches 1.0, most projects don't even have what I'm about to describe, by the way. So Meshery will have a massive compatibility list. Meshery interacts with 10 different service meshes. Those service meshes interact with any number of different Kubernetes releases. There are 90 plus certified Kubernetes distributions. There are any number of Prometheus versions, Grafana versions, blah, blah, blah. There's an astronomically large permutation of compatibility to be tracked across all of these things. We won't track those broadly. We will track high level, and we do what service mesh versions are compatible with each of the adapters. So does this adapter support what version of Linkerd? We track that in a manual way. And as the project goes up, there will be more rigor around tracking that and there is a suite of automated tests that occur for not all of the adapters, but a few of the adapters. Every time before release of them, there's a suite of tests that basically end-to-end functional tests where the adapter will spin it up in a temporary Kubernetes thing. We'll do functional tests. And then that's it. And then we might manually update the compatibility matrix.
Okay, so it's not a thing yet.
No. Right. Right. And most projects don't ever get to, and most projects, a lot of commercial enterprise software only do that level of compatibility testing to only so well. I'm not saying that we shouldn't. I'm just kind of giving context. Back to you, Aditi. And so, Aditi, I interrupted. I think you were mostly tracking.
I have a question. So in the example mesh config you've given, what advantage does specifying it this way have it compared to specifying it as Meshery and Meshery operator?
Yep. If you would maybe lay out. Go ahead and change it to be a different proposal.
I meant so currently what I've implemented is there is Meshery latest. I mean this is under version and Meshery latest. So how is specifying it as an adapter better? I think.
Yeah, that's right. You could, they both achieve the same thing, and we already, there becomes no difference.
Okay, so my current implementation, I don't know if I was clear enough while describing it. It does this. So do you want me to redo it to make it like this?
Oh boy, I've got a stuck key. Apologies, I can't get my shift key. Okay. Well, that's what happens when you eat over your keyboard, I guess. It's disgusting. Okay. So the reason to stick with the same, like there's no, if we were starting from scratch, you might do it the way that you're doing it. Since we're not starting from scratch and there's a convention, you have to overcome the inertia and prove that your design is better. And that's not specific to this, that's just a general statement. And so indulge us. And this is a great exercise. Indulge your mind and ours, if you would, on why changing the convention is an improvement here.
From what I've understood, the operator isn't exactly an adapter, so I think we shouldn't lump it with them.
Yep. Okay. So that goes back. Yeah, we should have a design spec review. So I'm not sure who was, if hopefully Abhishek and Navendu, I suspected the two that you might have been speaking to, and I've been the direction. So we should absolutely treat it like an adapter. No difference. Same thing.
Okay.
The only difference is it has a CRD in addition to a deployment. Like there's just no, yeah, I mean, I'll try to help you think through this and all of us. And that is, well, gosh, what's special about it, or what's different? Why would it be treated different? So if you, I brought in, I just copied my config file, like an example of my config file to get a more full picture. So here's a copy of my config. It starts off with just high level. It has like I think there's two constructs right now, contexts and tokens. And by the way, this is an area of need. This is like an underformed area that isn't used well in Meshery CTL today. But so there's two things. Well, there's three, I guess. It's kind of top level. There's the current context, tokens, and then the full description of the contexts. And so the reason it's not that you don't know this, Aditi, but the reason I'm sort of covering that is to say, okay, well, let's analyze, load freshly into our minds what the structure of this is. It could be that, like, well, hey, if we're going to put them into the adapters stanza, like, well, like, technically it's not an adapter. So is everyone comfortable with that? That's kind of a misnomer. Like, oh, are we sure? And so it might be like, well, these aren't going to be the only custom controllers or custom resources or whatever term we want to use to describe them. And so while they might get, so to your point about like categorizing them here is like, is I think well aligned with my point of we should treat them as much like adapters. I didn't say it like this, but I'll rephrase it. We should treat them as much like adapters as possible, which would be like, hey, sort of, okay, don't mislabel it. Like, go ahead and give it it's the appropriate label. And then, but the reason that I'm putting it underneath here and here is because that's doing two conventions at once, and it's like one's perpendicular to the next. It's not. You could even if you did what you're just suggesting, which you might go like, okay, well, hey, that actually, that for whatever reason, that's just nicer. So let's just put it under. Let's just move them all together under here. It would kind of still look the same. It would be like, hey, what are these all subscribed to? Well, they're all subscribed to Edge because they're under Edge. And so, and there might be use cases that you can think of that where if we wanted to get super sophisticated, where, okay, well, how sophisticated do we let users get today? It's like, well, they're never going to run Istio, so they can delete that. Okay, that's the sophistication, that's the customization, that's nice. Also, there's, for whatever reason, they want to perpetually hang out on Edge latest here, while they want to hang back, on some, so we let them customize and manipulate in terms of, now, an interesting thing is they can cross pollinate their release channels, I believe. I don't know that we've ever tested this. So this is kind of an interesting thing. It's like, well, this deployment called Bob's Kubernetes, it's subscribed to the Edge channel, but maybe they wanted to use, and I think that that's feasible. We should see if that gets honored. I am willing to bet you 50 US dollars that it is honored. Oh boy. Are we recording? Okay. Well, Aditi, why don't you go test it privately? And if I'm wrong, then you accept my bet and then we'll, but so anyway, Aditi, we're spending a long time on this. I didn't mean to, but I mean, like, it's good questions. I feel terrible when someone asks a great question and then the response is super concise and it's no, like that doesn't feel good and no one learns. And but so how does
Okay.
this proposal strike people?
Um, so so finally, this is what I've already implemented. So instead of this, I'll do what you said. I'll create a separate category controllers, and in that I'll put Meshery operator. Does
Yeah,
that?
yeah, Aditi, like, but like, I think it would be best if we like iterate over this spec for a while and make sure that before we start implementing, let's make sure that we have the right spec and then we can do it right.
Okay, okay, cool. Okay, I'll
Yeah,
wait sometime. I started too soon. I get it. I'll wait.
yeah, the like just add the considerations made right now and into the spec, and then maybe we can review it and then go ahead.
I'll definitely do that.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay, so moving on, we have Samir who has been testing out Meshery to be deployed to be used in a AKS deployment. So Samir, do you want to uh, lead on?
Yes. So, uh, good morning. If most of them don't know me, I'm Samir. So I have been introduced to Layer 5 recently, and I'm part of the community recently. And we have just decided to start few of the kind of POCs on this. There were few problem statement which led us, in fact me, to adapt and come to Meshery to kind of mm, do a POCs on our ISTO. Okay, so just a quick thing before I just head into the issues which I faced. If I can share my screen.
Yeah, please. Yeah, you should
Yeah,
be able.
go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. So is it visible?
Yeah,
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 yeah, now it's easy.
Yes. So before that, just a formal disclaimer. Maybe I can ask some silly questions, so don't mind. Okay.
That's
So
just like we don't even. That's just a given. I mean, we just don't even. There's no.
yeah. Yes. First thing, what exactly I find it's something which is not conventional for from a kind of a DevOps guy from my side is I can see there are a lot of things here. With the left side pan, if you see, I just use ISTO, but I can see there is a whole bunch of service mesh which have been installed here, right here. Maybe if this list can populate depending upon the service mesh which I am using, that would be very handy for me. Instead, because let's say I'm using only ISTO, but this is kind of no use for me. The whole bunch of other things which it has. Okay, so what I'm telling in the same constant, in the same context is this kind of checks which is happening service mesh here. Okay, if these checks can be done in the provider page. Okay, Okay, so here after once I select this, and if depending upon some checks whether I have my service mesh already installed or not, if that checks can be done here, then when I click it, depending upon that, so this can be populated. So I can see only my service mesh here instead of seeing all of this. So which will be kind of handy for me. So maybe if I have made some sense.
Yeah. Any feedback for any comments on Samir's suggestion?
uh, they can be disabled, I guess, if it is the purpose is for marketing. And like basically you can highlight the ones that have been enabled. And
Yeah, totally. So, Samir, great point. And I think, you're not the first to, I think you're not the first to highlight this. As a matter of fact, it used to work differently. It used to work exactly like you just said, which is if you don't have an adapter deployed in your environment, then you don't see a link to that service mesh because you're not dealing with that service mesh. So why are we overloading the user with a bunch of links? And earlier in the project, it was because we wanted to let everyone know that there was lots of different service meshes that can be managed. Anymore, I think that that's well understood, and anymore, the screenshots and videos and things that are done to help promote an understanding of the project and to kind of market the project, well, that's a separate concern from the real-time user experience that you as a user who's choosing to only interact with Istio, you don't perpetually need to see Kuma if it's not going to be there. It's just getting in your mouse's way. And so that's excellent feedback. We should execute on it. There's already a few different logical conditions within the menu that can be updated really quick to accomplish what you just asked. Moreover, as a point of nerdy interest, you can deploy 15 Istio adapters. Like you can deploy adapters of the same type of service mesh, a lot of them. And if you do, the menu is dynamic and it will list out each adapter independently. But so thanks for that.
Yeah, and another thing is that which I found. So let's say once I'm going to profile, okay, so there is no direct link to go to my overview tab. So which I discovered to click on here. So which is like, for a new user may not be kind of a ergonomics way. So maybe before performance here can be some overview tab, and you can just map it to this system dashboard or the overview somewhere. So
Yeah, Samir, good. That's fantastic. Thank you for walking us through this as you calling these. So for my part, and anyone else is welcome to add commentary here as well. But for my part, I'd considered the same, that like yeah, it wasn't necessarily immediately intuitive. If you're on a web page, okay, you might be expected to guess that, but you're not on a web page. You're in an app, and so the curious if on the upper right hand corner there's a few icons. Well, over by your avatar, yeah, and well, there's one on the very left of the three icons in the upper right hand corner. There's yep, yeah. That is a link to the same page. It's a link to the dashboard. That
okay.
said,
Okay,
hey,
sorry, I might
no,
have...
no. See, but that doesn't mean anything. What means something is that you didn't see it.
Okay.
And that's obviously your fault. No, like that's obviously not your fault, is the thing. Like, hey, yeah, there's a button there to do exactly what you just said, but if you didn't see it, well, that's not your fault. I mean, you know what I mean? Like, so it's something for everyone here to ponder a little bit. Like, how are we, like right now, hey, where is Samir? Well, if I look over on the menus on the left-hand side, I don't know, I can't tell. Where is he? If I look on the upper right-hand corner,
Yeah,
Well, hell, I don't know. Where is he? I don't know. I have no idea. Other than like I can look at in the center and I can look at the title of the page. But so why don't we take hyperlinks and make the active hyperlink light blue?
yeah, that is also much more ergonomic, I would say, so that it will give me a feel like where I am doing, or
Yeah.
maybe,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Totally. Then you actually had we have the dashboard icon light blue when you're on it, like if we colorize the page that you're on, you might have actually your eyes might have been drawn to it and you might have discovered you might have connected the dots, whereas
yes,
you didn't. Yeah.
yeah. And so that is what I have found so far today. And the most important thing comes now. So wherein, like, this is like the ISTO has already been installed on my machine. So maybe if I can see. Okay, so I have already installed my ISTO. After that, I have started this, like, I have installed this particular Meshery on top of that, but it didn't, like, apparently mm, identify that I had ISTO on file. So I have passed on my comments onto that and the logs also. So if, like, you can say something what I'm missing right now, because what I could see is it is now using my cluster config. So which ideally should feed this system that I have a ISTO already installed.
Um,
Actually, the issue in your case is that basically when Meshery is getting installed inside the cluster, the service account that gets created is doesn't have privileges to uh, install operator or install custom resources. So I like basically that's an issue that needs to be fixed.
Okay, so can I do that myself? So uh, in the Helm chart or somewhere?
Yeah, uh, it has to be changed in the Helm chart. Actually, the template of the Helm chart.
Okay, so is that something which has been, like, as per the system context or the product context, the user has to do, or it has to come from the like, Mesri?
It has to come from Meshery. Like basically, it needs to be fixed from our end.
and there's no workaround right now.
Okay,
Um, Workaround basically there is a workaround that we can apply custom roles, like apply Kubernetes manifest of roles defining uh, the CRDs and like basically you need to update permissions in the roles, and that's it.
yeah, I'll try out that. So maybe I'll try the airbag. So let's see if it works. So what all exactly the access it would need? So uh,
I can help you with that.
okay, sure. And the next thing is, yeah. So I am now happy that my SRE has been installed and I have the dashboard and everything. So now I want to, like, interact from my command line. So to interact with my like, message system from the command line, is it necessary to have the Docker installed in my system?
It kind of depends. Like if you're, I see that you are using in cluster config, so you have Meshery deployed inside the Kubernetes cluster, so you won't need Docker.
Okay, so those kind of configuration actually, is it documented somewhere? Actually, I didn't find it. So
Who's Yeah, Hussein, that is another great point, Samir. Hussein, you've taken a step or two to help provide users, um, yeah, help stop forcing Docker on users, I think is the,
Yeah.
so
So
Yeah.
because I do not want to overload my system with the Docker for to access or communicate with my Messery because it is already in cluster or
Samir, you installed with the bash script? So you installed Meshery CTL with the bash script?
yes, yeah.
Husseina is the woman. She is, Husseina, do you have a, how are you
So
thinking?
was
Yeah.
there, was there any issue with the bash script installation? Sorry, I did not get the exact issue.
No, if you see here,
Mhm.
Messery CTL, it is already installed. If you see, so now how can I connect to my in cluster Messery from here, the command line.
Mhm.
So for that, do I need to, because when I did Messery CTL restart, uh,
System restart.
yes, restart, sorry.
Yep. So here, let me help short circuit some of this. I think there was an issue opened recently, or it may not. An issue might not have been open, but there was a chat that I had initiated, and Hussein, I'm going to mute you for just a moment, just because there's feedback on your line. But so the challenge here is that the bash script in its current form assumes that the users are running Docker locally. And I know you've made some considerations in the past for beginning to provide pervasive support for running Meshery on Kubernetes as a platform. And I think you have an optional flag in the bash script that is probably not prominent and is certainly not the default. And so thinking toward how to change this up and how to make that more understood is I think I made a suggestion. I thought I opened an issue. Maybe it's in chat, but the probably the right suggestion here is that yes, users can supply um, uh, tags, parameters when they execute the bash script. Great, that's perfect. That helps with automated installation of Meshery CTL. Automated downloading and installing. And we would probably want to support a silent flag on that as well, which I think we've got some prior art for. What we probably want to do by default, like instead of supporting either Docker by default or Kubernetes by default, is by default prompt the user. It's probably what we'll want to do. If the user has supplied an argument in the script, which by the way, we should update meshery.io and have, on the getting started section with the script, we should have those two options and make it pretty clear that they can just copy and paste either one of the two and go from there. But else if they don't provide a parameter, we probably shouldn't assume one or the next, because in assuming that it will be Docker, we're basically telling the users that they can't run Meshery unless there's Docker present. And so we should probably ask them, prompt them.
Yeah, so the prompting would have been a great way to install it.
I think -y option is for that, right? So which is already present for most of the system commands. And as far as the platform is concerned, I think Navindu, you have this platform option as well, right? But it's only with start or
I guess we have it for start, but I'm not sure. But even though, then it would only be a temporary override. So we should be like, as Lee mentioned, we should be prompting the user to check their platform before we create a config file for default. So I think that should work. And for Samir, like to
Yeah,
fix this
prompting.
currently, you can just change your platform in the uh, Meshery config file, which will be inside the Meshery folder. So just change that to Kubernetes, and you will be able to run Meshery CTL commands.
Okay. Yeah. Great. Okay. So that's all from my side. So we'll be continuing the same test probably. Like, we have not yet started, so we are just configuring. So maybe from tomorrow we'll start doing all sort of things. So before that, I'll be getting in touch with Abhishek to get the things sorted to actually identify my ISTO. Okay, yeah. So yeah, that's from my side.
That's
Thank you.
that's that's great, Samir. Thank you. Some of those are a little embarrassing. They're just little small items that are easy to clean up. So, Husseina, as you think about the issue, the perspective from which I encourage you to think of that last challenge is from scratch, from the very beginning, before a user has anything about Meshery on their system. They go to, they don't always follow this, but they would go to meshery.io.
Yeah,
They see that the bash script is one of the choices, and if they use that today, it actually says it on the screen. um, let me show you this, just because I want to clarify, so that Hussein, you can move forward with this, which is you go to getting started. Okay, well, choose your platform. Well, you know what, I'll just go ahead and use bash. That's convenient. Now, if you are like me, I don't read anything more than I have to. I see a copy button. There it is. I'm good to go. I'm going to go. And I
yeah,
didn't see that. Oh, that's using Docker. Oh, okay. Well, where's the option for using Kubernetes? Okay, well, there isn't one for bash. Oh, but there is. Oh, but it's not documented. Oh, okay. So I guess I have to go over here and use, geez, something else. You know what? I'd rather use bash. Oh, wait, but this only works with Docker. Hopefully that helps, Hussein. So,
yeah.
Hussein, yeah, I think Hussein, if you agree, it's A, have a second stanza here. We need to clarify with, and by the way,
Yeah.
not with words, but with pictures, Docker logo and Kubernetes logo, because um, you know, because I'm lazy, and I assume everyone else is as well. The second thing is, if that parameter is not specified, we
That
should
is
remove our assumption and prompt the user, like Piyush is saying.
yeah, that is the same with me. I couldn't take time to read through, so I just went and just copied and so
You're a lazy man.
yeah, thank you.
Yeah, no. Hussein, go ahead. I know you were
Yes.
trying.
Yeah. So basically, like an environment variable or maybe a prompt, right? Both of that should be okay to pass to the Meshery script, right? Yeah.
Yeah,
So prompt would be very, like, straightforward for an end user perspective,
Mhm.
so that I can just click on so yes, no, or K for Kubernetes, D for Docker, or something like that. Or so, yeah.
but Hussein, I think if you check in the Meshery CTL channel, this is probably, there's either an open issue or a chat. But the thing, it is actually critical to do this in a specific way and to get it right, because people will get snagged, and that is, I think there's kind of three considerations. One, an update on meshery.io to have that second option to make it clear that one is, one's is like the one that is there now. It shouldn't be opinionated. It's the one for prompting the user. As secondary considerations, and maybe smaller little notes, is that we could note that there's a optional flags that you can pass, that like when people want to eventually automate the install and deployment of Meshery that they can supply those environment variables. And it's not as critical to have those as prominent in that particular page, because that page is meant to be like getting started very quickly. But for advanced use cases and environment variables and stuff, there can be a link to, we can figure out how to show that to them there or link them to the docs. But the behavior would be that, yeah, by default, they're prompt with a question. They can override it with a silent answer using an environment variable, like you're saying.
Yes. Sure, surely.
Nice. Good.
Right now, actually, Meshery script takes minus y as the default option with Docker installation and starts Docker by default. Yes, yeah. Surely, I'll take a look at that. Yeah.
And one
Okay.
last generic question. So sorry to interrupt. So when I install any ISTO or any service mesh through the Meshery, so would it automatically create a ingress gateway for me, or do I have to do it manually?
It creates it automatically for you. We should clarify, just because that term is a little bit overloaded, is that the special instance of an Envoy proxy that runs as the Istio ingress, yes, it will be automatic. An instance of that will be automatically deployed when you go into Meshery's UI and you click to deploy Istio. Yeah. It will subsequently need to be configured to allow, to route traffic to, to the specific, to your app and stuff.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. And so, Samir, as a prelude to, like, assuming some successful next steps for you, a prelude, you will come back very shortly and provide feedback saying, well, it would be wonderful if in the Meshery UI for managing Istio, and all the rest of the service meshes, if you exposed a knob for a control for deploying my ingress or not, and then subsequently, and like in deploying an egress gateway or not, and subsequent to that, if I choose to deploy one of the two of them or both of them, I might also like to apply some config, like right there, because I'm going to deploy this app. And so I'd like to open up this port or have these, virtual services and destination rules configured. And that level of detail isn't supported in the UI today. Meshery is capable of that through pattern files, or it's getting there. And so,
Yeah. So why it came to my mind is, so I the thought process was like, so when I click on that link, or when I install Mesri in my Kubernetes or Kubernetes AKS cluster, it should ideally directly give me one IP address to directly access Mesri instead of going to my localhost. So
totally, that's another good, totally. And I think who Aditi and Piyush, you two are kind of working on that very thing. So Piyush, as you work through the system checks, it's, I think we were just talking about this yesterday on an issue where we were going to system check for the availability of, it was Aditi, right? Of the Meshery endpoint, and not just the fact that we can open a TCP communication with the Meshery endpoint, but also verify an unauthenticated API like the /system/version API.
yeah, that would be great because we are struggling there. So we are now maintaining it with rewrite. So
Oh, okay. Actually, Samir, you might be talking even past. So what I was saying was like, hey, when you do Meshery CTL system start and you want to, and it tells you to sign into Meshery and it gives you a URL, that URL is ideally has the appropriate port and also has verified that in fact Meshery is
Yeah.
there reachable and available.
Yeah.
I mean, it won't always be the case that we like, because there's so many ways to expose Meshery's UI and do networking and all these things, and depending upon where you're sitting and whether or not the network is available and et cetera, like we might be able to only take that so far. But of the subsequent thing that you just said, were you talking about Meshery verifying your accessibility to your workload endpoints?
Workload endpoints. Yeah.
Okay. From so say a little bit more if you would, kind of just you're
Yes.
saying like, yeah.
Yeah. So now, Messery, I have the Kubernetes already, and I do have my microservices running, and my, you say the cluster IP are already there. And so when I install Messery, so my expectation is, so it should validate my, cluster IPs, which is basically, let's say with some label. So if I say this is a label for my service, and this is a actual cluster IP which needs to be accessed from outside, so it should provide me a, proper endpoint to that. So it should configure that ideally with that cluster, with that cluster IP.
For okay, yep, good, for accessing Meshery's UI or for accessing your workload endpoint.
Yeah, my workload endpoint. So
Okay, yeah. So very good. Let me ask you this. That makes a lot of sense that Meshery should facilitate a few things. Like one, what's the health of my one? Help me deploy my workloads. That might be nice. It's not that people don't do it in different ways, but since you're right there, it might be nice to also deploy your workload. Visualize it and some of the things that we were talking about. It would also be nice if Meshery was sort of telling you the health of the, if the workload is up and accessible, generate some load against it, let you test performance and things like that, but also help you expose it through the Istio ingress gateway
ingress
and
gate.
and provide certain like rewrite paths or whatever configurations you might want to do.
Yeah, so
Yes.
I'm ready to give some sort of instructions, like what should be my path routing should be, and if it is required. So then depending upon if there is a DNS already attached to my STO ingress gateway, so it will just create some qualified domains for some of the services.
Makes a ton of sense. That's good. We'll get some of this written down on paper so that we can. So I would say that like, hey, the tool, to your point, needs to grease the wheels and facilitate this. And there's some safe, intelligent decisions and actions that it can take. There are some decisions and actions that it might just queue up for you and suggest that maybe this is what you want to do, but not actually do it in case, oh no, you're not ready to expose that to the world just yet. So make it easy for me, but don't, some of this stuff,
Yeah.
the tool. Okay, cool. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's my thought. So when I see the complexity of ISTO to do it manually with my YAML file, so I thought, why not, if we have something which is managing the ISTO, so I would expect the ISTO management tool would supplement these kind of things. So
Yeah. And you would be, that's a great assumption to make. Yeah, yes, it should. Absolutely. Yeah. Samir, great feedback today. This is good.
yeah, thank you. That's from my side. So if I ask some silly questions, so that, as I told, so that can.
Totally. I know. There's no such thing here. That's kind of what I was trying to say. I was making a bad joke. There's no silly questions here. So.
Yeah, thank you.
Navendu, I know we sort of spilled over. Did we miss
Yeah.
anything?
Yeah, we missed a couple of recent works on Wasm filters, Image Hub, and the new feature to add filters in Meshery UI. So we had a discussion yesterday, and the summary of it is available on the Wasm channel on Slack. And
Um,
yeah,
Okay, so a more detailed thing, we typed it up in the specification itself. I know we're not supposed to put in meeting minutes in the specification, but just temporary dump there, and it sort of helped us align our goals. So there are currently 3 people working on 3 different things on the project, and a lot of our tasks or goals are overlapping. And essentially, the meeting's purpose was to sort of discuss where the overlap is occurring, who needs to coordinate with in regards to what, and also I guess Gaurav did not join, and I'm extremely confused as to where what work he's doing. I was hoping to get that clarified now, but okay, I guess we'll catch up. I'll catch up with him at a later point of time. Um, yeah, that's pretty much it.
yeah, I guess, yeah, Gaurav, and we will discuss this on this on Slack. So yeah, that would be best, I guess. So
So
thanks, Samir, for that.
yeah,
That's really good. Yeah, yeah, Pranav, go ahead.
no, we don't have time, so it's all right.
Yeah, no problem. Like yeah, so we are already 10 past. So I guess it's time to wrap up this meeting, and thank you everyone for joining. I guess I will see you Friday community call. Bye.
Thank you, Nivendu. Bye.